Well, ladies and gentlemen, we've got an update on the current tariff situation with Donald Trump and his approval rating, and potentially some of these countries being able to negotiate out of the tariffs, like Argentina and Javier Milei. We're going to get to that, but you can see this. Here it is. Trump's approval rating increases after the tariffs. Now, this is JL Partners polling, and I will say, look, you know, we're going to really try and format like this is going to improve Trump's approval rating in the short term. I don't think so. That's why you need to look at the composite numbers. But I mean, the overall point is, and this is important for people to understand when it comes to Trump's approval rating. Number one, it's mainly irrelevant as long as it stays above like 45, 46%. When you start getting lower, then it starts becoming bad in terms of the press that Trump will receive in terms of the approval rating. But if it's like 45, 46%, 50%, I mean, right now it's like 50%. Usually this poll in specific, it's 53%. As long as it's like 45 or higher, it doesn't really matter. Especially now, considering it's all the turbulence, and we've talked about everything that needs to happen, and the 10-year yield going down and the inflation going down. Now the core inflation is back under, it's significantly under 2%, and we're going to get the full inflation data on the 10th. Hopefully it continues to go down. But this is a reset of the economy to try and retool things that will be in Americans' best interest when it comes to bringing manufacturing back to the United States. Because you can do the CHIPS Act, you can do the infrastructure bill, but there has to be a reason to produce things in the U.S. There was not a reason until these tariffs were put into place, because if it's cheaper to produce things in other countries, that's what's going to happen. Even if you make infrastructure strides and investments, that's why Taiwan is coming to the United States, because of the tariffs. And it's so important people understand that. And listen, when it comes to Trump's approval rating, it's very important. You look at right track, wrong track. It's something that is always, I mean, because people are very bearish on the United States, it's a negative thing. Normally, the wrong track is like at a 70%. The right track's at a 30%. Recently, we've seen it tick up. It's like 55-45, which is amazing. So like 45% of the country thinks the United States is on the right track. Now, that's probably going to go down a little bit because there's reaction to these tariffs and the stock market drop. And I said there's going to be a major stock market drop. That's just what it is with the tariffs. It's an immediate drop. If anything, this is noble by Trump, because he's sacrificing short-term approval for long-term growth, not only during his administration, but for future administration, if there is a commitment to domestic production. And all this fear-mongering, oh, it's going to cost people $4,000. That's actually impossible to predict, because we don't know which tariffs are staying on versus going off. We don't know the current trade situation with Canada and Mexico, our two biggest trading partners. We think there's probably going to be a renegotiation of that free trade agreement, and it's going to be a significantly better negotiation for Trump and the United States, and we're going to get a better deal than we got in 2020. I think it initially came into law in July of 2020, and then we're going to renegotiate it in 2026. But now we're waiting, and the premiers in Canada are saying, we can't take this. We cannot deal with these tariffs because of our trade surplus with the United States. We rely on that consumer base, and that's another key thing that people are missing. The United States consumer base, you've got all these people. I mean, some of them are like these conservatives who just don't like Trump, and then obviously all the liberals. They're like, oh, all these countries are just going to start trading with the Chinese. Well, the Chinese don't have anywhere close to our consumer base in terms of how wealthy we are. And so it's not, you cannot replace it. And then this is another thing that you can look at. You understand economics, you know this. Tariffs raise prices once. And that's a general thing. Obviously, it's going to fluctuate a little bit when it comes to the tariffs happening and how things get repriced. But the thought is they raise and they come back down. Inflation is when prices keep rising. Well, yes, but also the other thing with inflation, it's all about money printing. There's more money in circulation, so your dollar is worth less. Even if things go up in terms of how much they cost over a short period of time, that's not inflation. They keep saying, well, it's inflation. No, just because things cost a little bit more, that's not inflation. Inflation is when there's more money and it devalues your current money. Your current money is still worth the same. Just because a certain product in a certain sector costs more now, that's not inflation. See, if you print more money, all of your money, no matter what it is, goes down in terms of overall value. But if you're dealing with one certain sector where, oh, I can't get a Nintendo 3DS now for $299, it's $349. It's really not inflation. That's a certain sector. It doesn't mean your purchasing power is significantly less in everything. But if you print a lot more money, you introduce it, then that's when it becomes a problem in terms of inflation. So this is like this fake inflation. They're trying to say, well, it's going to be huge inflation. Number one, there's no way you could even calculate the inflation that comes off of these tariffs because we don't know the tariffs that Trump is going to be keeping in place and not negotiating with certain countries. So think about that. That's what I keep saying. It's like they keep trying to calculate this stuff. It's all fear mongering. It's scare tactics. You know, one is a price shock. The other is a failure of monetary policy. Well, no, I agree. And they're trying to manipulate it and say, well, inflation is going to be the result of these tariffs. Well, no, it is a shock. The prices are going to go up. That's just the reality of trying to drive up domestic production. This has to happen. We have to bite this bullet and do it. And how about all these liberals now? And they're getting called out left and right by conservatives. Now they care about 401ks. Now they care about the stock market. We know the people that make by far the most majority of money. It's not mom and pop people that have $60,000 salaries. It is the multi-millionaires, the multi-billionaires who can compound money a lot easier because they already have a ton of money. They're the ones that are losing in this. So you think these people that are obsessed with wealth inequality, they would love something like this, but because they can't do that because it would be, I mean, if they really want to reset this thing, they should like that Trump is doing this. He's taking a lot of money away from rich people with this shock stock market loss, but they just hate Trump so much, so they're going to back and start simping for the big corporations that are losing all the money. And so it's like, oh, the 401k. Well, are you taking your 401k out? Is that like tomorrow? Is that going to be happening? It's ridiculous. This is something that it builds up over time. And we think, well, we pretty much know that the prices eventually in the stock market will go back up once the inflation continues to go down, the Fed rates happen. They're talking about a recession. I will say, you know, a recession, if it does happen, and we'll see, I mean, you can look at Polymarket, you can look at some other betting things. They're saying, well, you know, 55, 60% chance of happening. I say it's an overreaction. It depends. We'll see what happens with quarter one. The growth rate, if it is negative, even if it's negative by like 0.5, there's going to be a huge narrative that we're going to have a recession, a huge narrative. But we'll have to see what that ends up being. I don't know. There's a lot of people. I mean, the White House said it was a 2.5% growth rate they expect. The Atlanta Fed said it was negative 2.5. And then you've got some other people saying, well, it's probably going to be positive, but only by 0.5, 0.6. You know, as long as it's positive, I don't think we really have a big deal because I don't think it, you know, Q3 and Q4 or Q2 and Q3 are both going to be negative. I don't think that. But if Q1 is negative, then there's a potential because these tariffs went in right at the start of Q2 on April 2nd. There's a potential that Q2 will also be negative. But, you know, this is a reset. It is what it is. We can deal with it. It's just going to hurt Trump's approval rating if it happens because, you know, and we saw the economic situation under Biden. It was significantly worse in terms of, yes, we had a recession. It was a very mild recession because it was like 2022, Q2, Q3, it was negative 0.6 and then negative 0.2 in terms of GDP growth. And that's with crazy inflation. Now, there were other economic factors that were signaling there was going to be a turnaround. So it wasn't a crazy recession, but that's a lot worse of a situation than what we have right now as long as inflation continues to go down. As long as inflation continues to go down, we deal with these negative growth quarters. We can absorb them a lot easier because you're talking about the domestic production. You're talking about Trump renegotiating all these trade deals. You're talking about now Trump says it's around $6 or $7 trillion invested in foreign money into the United States. That's all going to help, and it's all in the pipeline. So it's the next 4 or 5 months. You're also talking about the war's ending potential. Although we don't really know about Iran, but at least the war in Ukraine, hopefully that'll end. Vietnam says it wants to remove all tariffs on the U.S. due to the reciprocal tariffs placed last week. You've got all these great indicators talking about, you know, dropping 10%, the S&P 500. What happens? It normally, of course, rebounds. You could say, well, it's different because of these tariffs. But again, a lot of these tariffs are probably going to be negotiated. Now you've got Ben Shapiro pissed off, just spewing, bitching about the liberal talking points, saying, oh, you know, my Jewish friend got tariffed, and he's mad because Trump actually stood up to Israel and said, no, we're keeping the 17% tariff on Israel because Israel removed all of their tariffs because they knew there were going to be some form of reciprocal. And the left is also saying, well, these are not reciprocal tariffs. Well, no, it's based off of the deficit. They are right. They're not total reciprocal tariffs against these countries, but it was pitched that way as a propaganda tool by Trump and the administration, and you can understand that. But here's Shapiro, it's just bitching with leftist talking points about how everything's going to go up, and my friend now has to pay more money and things like this. This is just, this guy's got a lot of nerve for everything that Trump has done for Israel. To get this angry over a 17% tariff, especially the United States, for all the money we've given Israel. You'd think it would be like, all right, let's just let this slide, but no, he's even angry about this, and so they want him to remove the tariff on Israel. But everyone gets hit with tariffs. There was a funny thing about Israel getting hit with a 17% tariff, Iran getting hit with a 10% tariff. But listen, there's a lot of people that are on the right that criticize Trump and his support of Israel, and you do one thing that goes against it and they get really angry about it. It's just interesting how that works. And then you've also got this: United States and Argentina become the first zero tariff countries. This is Trump and Malay expected to sign an international trade agreement free of tariffs for both the United States and Argentine products. So this is historic, and this will be pitched as a huge win for Trump. Another thing I want to say when it comes to reciprocal tariffs and everything like that, Europe tends to utilize something that's similar to a tariff, but not the exact same thing. It's like a tax on all goods that come into their country. I believe it's called the VAT or the VAT. And so I would imagine, and listen, I'm not even sure, with the UK, that's probably going to be negotiated, because the UK apparently wants to negotiate with Trump. Now, whether or not Trump wants to do that or keep the tariffs in place, I don't know. It depends what our imports are from the UK and whether or not Trump wants the United States to produce those products. But the UK is different from the EU. I think the EU is going to try and play hardball, and the United States and the EU are not on the same page, especially when it comes to the situation with NATO and Ukraine. That's why we're starting to think, Elon Musk has come out and said, we're probably going to leave NATO. It's likely happening. Now they're coming out and saying they're going to fine Elon Musk $1 billion for disinformation. It's totally unacceptable. And it's just, this stuff is not going to be allowed, what the EU is doing. And the EU's come out and said, yes, we're very liberal. Any conservative that tries to come up into one of these countries in the pipeline, like Le Pen, we're just going to imprison them. We don't really care anymore. And so it's a bit, we don't believe in that, and we're not going to protect countries that live by that type of leadership. So we'll see what happens with Trump when it comes to that. But yeah, it's a situation to where Europe is utilizing something that's not necessarily the exact same as tariffs, but it acts in a similar way in terms of our products get taxed when we import them into the EU countries, and I believe also the UK as well. They utilize it, the VAT. And so that's probably something that's going to be negotiated out of by the Trump administration. So you got to be careful. It's like, well, they don't have tariffs on us. Well, they have taxes. They're not called tariffs. So there's a number, obviously it's a complicated situation, but you're going to start seeing more and more of this, and the administration will probably be able to pitch this as a win. I'm not saying this is going to happen with every country. I do think Trump is committed to a lot of these tariffs. He's committed to bring domestic production back to the United States. I agree. But I believe it's going to calm people, especially if Trump gets a renegotiated trade deal with Canada and Mexico. It's going to calm a lot of people when it comes to the stock market, when it comes to what he wants to do with all of these tariffs. And within the next 4 or 5 months, we're going to see a huge boom. Maybe not the next 4 or 5 months, but within going into the fall to the winter, we're going to see a big boom. It's a recovery. It is a recovery. And you say, well, Trump caused it. Well, no, this always had to happen. This is a reset to bring domestic production back to the United States, or at the very least, allow us to be able to trade with these countries and not get dinged, whether it's a VAT, whether it's a tariff by the other countries. And also, it potentially will significantly hurt China because of how reliant they are on us buying their products. And they're throwing a hissy fit, and they've got a major economy. They have a ton of manufacturing, I understand it, but based off of how poor their consumer base is, they are hit extremely hard by a 54% tariff. And they can tariff us at a 34% rate. That's fine. Go ahead and do it. China losing our consumer base, at least in terms of with these tariffs, and it's going to be a lot harder, is way more significant than us selling to the Chinese and being hit with a 34% tariff. Way more significant. Now, if you're a critic of Trump, you could say, well, why don't we just have a strategic, heavy tariff on China and maybe some other countries and some sectors rather than doing the flat tariff on everyone? Well, I think it's because Trump wants to have renegotiations with a lot of these countries to give the United States a more favorable deal. If you just look at a case study like Canada, to where we already had a relatively good trade deal with Canada, and it's not really because Canadians are nice. Now they'll say it's because they're nice. No, it's because we could take over their country by noon. I mean, they kind of have to have a good trade. I mean, we protect Canada. They do not have the military to protect themselves. So it's like, and so I think Trump sees that and he's like, well, this is not fair. It's just not fair. So he starts the tariffs on Canada. They get very angry. The tariffs on Mexico. Mexico kind of says, all right, we understand this. We'll deal with it. It's interesting with Mexico, and we'll see how this develops. I don't know the exact amount of corruption within the Mexican government. I know it's extensive, but I wonder if, since there is some cooperation with these tariffs, if there could be cooperation when it comes to the removal of these cartels within Mexico. The problem is the cartels are intertwined with the government, so it becomes an issue and very complicated. But I wonder if we could get the Mexican government to support strategies to remove these cartels within Mexico. But because of how nice they've been when it comes to these tariffs with Trump, at least to a degree. Canada on the other side, they're fighting. It's a little bit different with Canada. Obviously, there's a lot less corruption. They're an actual legit country, although they have their own issues. But and also the other thing with Canada is they are going through an election season. And so that's both sides, the conservative, the liberal, they're fighting for political leverage. And, Trump coming out and saying that he wants to annex Canada or he wants them to be the 51st state is not going to play too well for the Conservative Party in Canada. And that's why they've lost a lot in terms of the polls. And I know Canadians are saying, well, the polls are fake. They're being manipulated. There's no way Carney has these numbers. And maybe they're right. Maybe they are. We don't know. But just the big picture when it comes to this whole situation, the video is about Trump's approval rating, everything like that. So Trump's approval rating, whether you think it went up, it went down, look, when you have an economic turmoil like this, yes, the approval rating is probably going to go down. But Trump has such a solid base, and that's when we look at other metrics like right track, wrong track. And when he's got right track at 45%, he has a very solid base. It's a very solid base that believes in what he's doing. So when you have that, it becomes easier to go through these periods of turmoil within the economy because you have such a solid base that will support you. And you're not going to be dealing with the Biden where once you get down to like 38% approval rating, that mires your entire administration, like the Afghanistan. The Afghanistan situation completely defined the Biden administration and his approval rating, which, by the way, he got a lot more leeway than Trump did. And that's just from media love and media hype for Democrats. I mean, his approval rating was like 55%. And then within 2 years, it was at 38% and it never got better. I think it closed at like 35 or 36%. It was historically bad. He finished with a worse approval rating than Trump did. And that's with the media being completely against Trump, totally anti-Trump. They mired Trump in an investigation, called him an illegitimate president for 2.5 years because of the Russia hoax. And Biden still finished with a worse approval rating. So I think Trump would be fine in terms of approval. Look, what you want to say, well, I mean, they're trying to say his approval is going up with these tariffs. I mean, let's get some more polls. And this is not, people see the economy like this. And you talk about approval rating. It's a very micro thing. It's like a minimal time frame. So people react to the latest thing. Oh, my 401k's down. Oh, they said the stock market is doing bad. Oh, it's this negativity within the administration, so it's going to go down. But listen, we're really not going to see a crazy fluctuation. Not like it's going to drop to like 42 or 41% his approval rating. Now, within certain polls, it might. And a lot of it's fake, and they do it because they try and create propaganda. It's like they'll say, well, all these liberal people will start spewing next week. Oh, there's this new poll from some liberal site, 35% approval rating. And the poll is completely fake. They oversample Dems, but they just use it as propaganda. So that's another thing that they do. And then they say, well, this is propaganda. Well, no, this is a legit poll. This is a legit pollster. So these people, they grade out well. So that's the difference. But listen, there's not going to be a big dip in Trump's approval rating, even with this situation. And we've explained it. And you've got all these people on the right bitching, complaining about this. This is just ripping the Band-Aid off, whether you think it's too much or not. I mean, there's going to be negotiations. Some of these tariffs are going to come off. It's going to be spun as a win for the administration as long as the fundamental numbers, like a 10-year yield, keeps dropping, like the inflation keeps dropping, and you get the Fed cuts. Now we're in business within the next 4 or 5 months. And this is with Trump being completely wishy-washy on everything. And I know, listen, the economy has not done well. The stock market's been down. I get it. And I'm not trying to self-blame people like other conservatives will, where they'll say, well, who cares about money? No, I mean, I understand people. It's very important. I get it. And we want people to make money under Trump, but it's a reset to be able to do it. Rather than because if Trump decides to keep doing what Biden was doing, now Trump's facing a hostile Fed. Now you're talking about the Fed finally dropping in like Q3 of 2026 or Q4 of 2026. We're speeding up the process, and we're also getting better trade deals, or we're getting more domestic production. And that's not even mentioning the potential revenue that can be made, which I don't think it's going to be $600 billion. It's just not going to. That's if Trump keeps everything on, which I highly doubt. And that would have to be like everything goes perfect as well. So it won't be 600 billion in revenue, but could it be 200 billion? I mean, it's possible. It could be 200 billion in revenue off tariffs. It could be 250 billion. I think those are semi-realistic numbers. Maybe it's only 150 billion. I don't know what it's going to be. I don't know what Trump will keep on. I mean, the auto tariffs alone, they say if he keeps all of them on, it's 100 billion in revenue every single year. Until, and then that would go down, obviously, if there's more domestic production, because then you're not paying the tariff, but you're creating the parts and the vehicles in the United States. So it becomes a win-win. Well, you either get the revenue. Well, it's a loss win-win, because the initial prices will rise and then they'll go down. It just takes time. But see, the problem is when we argue these things when it comes to the economy, there is a liberal point because of trade-offs. Yes, there will be an initial price hike. That's the reality of it. There's really nothing you can do to stop that. When you're talking about economic factors, there are trade-offs. This is economics 101. So, listen, we'll see what happens when it comes to this. But I don't think Trump's approval rating is going to drop too much. I think it'll be fine. We'll see what the market does on Monday. I mean, we would like to have a positive day, honestly. This is a very short-term, it's short picture. It doesn't really matter but we'd like to see a positive day on Monday. I mean, we don't want it to get clobbered again. That'd be 3 straight days, and that would, obviously with the weekend in between, it's just very bad sentiment. But we'll see what happens. Either way, guys, that's going to do it for this video. Make sure you follow me on X. Links to that's always in the description.